panel. Well, this panel is titled Workforce Development and Labor Mobility. And I would like to start with a brief introduction, and then I will pass the floor to our panelists. And the topic of workforce and labor mobility in North America has been particularly sensitive in the USA-Mexico relations. It's sensitive and it is critical at the same time. Allow me to make perhaps an uncomfortable comparison. One of the pillars of the European Union integration process was workforce, and with that, academic cooperation. In general terms, as a European Union national working in the European Union, people can enjoy certain rights under the law. For example, you don't need a permit to work in another European Union country. You can live in the country where you work. You can also enjoy the same rights as nationals of that country, like the payment, health and safety, social security, and tax advantages. Of course, this is not the reality in North America, and North American integration, in fact, has never considered, either on NAFTA or in the USA-MCA, have never considered a mechanism similar to the European case. So I think the challenge is to find the mechanisms appropriate to our own context. Having said that, I think it is unnecessary to elaborate more on why this is a sensitive issue here in North America. The topic is critical because both countries, needless to say, are interdependent. They need each other. Mexico is the largest supplier of labor to the United States, but let us remember that the topic is not a zero-sum game. Workforce is not a zero-sum game. More educated and trained people will mean greater growth for both countries' economies, which are deeply intertwined and function as a region competing against other regions, particularly China and Asia. Let me share a well-known example that highlights how the US and Mexico collaborate as a region. Both national governments are advancing a regional strategy to develop a skilled workforce for the chip and the semiconductor industries. These initiatives aims to prevent future supply chain crises caused by the American economy's extreme dependence on Asian semiconductors. Let me share another example from my personal experience related to this current event. Here in Arizona State University, the ASU supports and acknowledges this cross-border approach promoted by the two national governments by advancing training and education projects with Mexico. Well, here in the panel, Jose Quiroga is one of the champions of those initiatives, as well as leaders like James O'Brien, Vice President here in ASU, and Paola Garcia. I think this is an interesting example, and for sure there may be more. Universities are strategic agents in developing workforce needed to address the challenges of a globalized world, in which recent events, which in recent years has experienced multiple crises and disruptions caused by pandemics, wars, economic downturns, and the rise of nationalism and xenophobia, among other issues. This is only the beginning of the conversation, as there are more agents and angles that help address workforce development. And of course, this is a very complex and broad topic, and all our panelists will speak from their experience, from their backgrounds, from their industries, their communities, in a different angle that can contribute to find ways to leverage, as has been discussed during this day, leverage the cross-border partnerships between Mexico and the United States. Well, I'm going to present my panelists. They are going to introduce themselves, give more background about what they do. But first, let me begin with Jose Quiroga. He's the Director of Global Development at the Office of the Global Outreach and Extended Education here in ASU. Judy Ferreira, she's Executive Director of the Arizona Indian Gaming Association. Jorge Mendoza Yescas, Consul General of Mexico in Phoenix, and Sean Miley, who has been the Executive Director of CONAHEC, Consortium for North American Higher Education Collaboration. Well, please join me to applaud my panelists, and we are ready to listen to them. Well, I think that we can start with a first round of comments and a little bit of your background. And if you are okay, we said that we'll begin with Sean, and then I will join them in the couches. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Miguel, and thanks very much to the Arizona Arizona State University School of Transborder Studies for the invitation today. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you all. My name is, as you said, Sean Manley Casimir. I've worked at the Consortium for North American Higher Education Collaboration since 2001, and I've been its executive director since 2013. And the Consortium is a group of higher education institutions, primarily in Mexico, the United States, and Canada, and we also have members in an additional 16 countries.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you to my friend Jesus Rodriguez Davalos. He's very brave to invite me to be this panel. Well, some of you already know me. My name is Jorge Mendoza Yescas. I'm the Consul General of Mexico here in Phoenix. I have been in Phoenix for 5 years. As you know, the consulate has a lot of duties to perform. We do documentation, community affairs, protection and consular assistance, but also we have the duty to promote economic exchange and other aspects of the relationship that we have with the state of Arizona. And well, thank you again for the invitation.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Dagote. Let's try that again. Da-go-te. That is the greeting on the Apaches of hello, how are you? Hope you're in good health. So, Dagote, she Judy Ferreira Gonze, she Sanga, she Sitze Eheskidden, she Director, Arizona Indian Gaming Association. So, me gustaría presentarme. Me llamo Judy Chavarria Ferreira. Pertenezco de la tribu de los Apaches de San Carlos. Vivo con mi familia en la reservación de San Carlos en Arizona. Yo estoy casada. Mi esposo se llama Benny Ferreira y tenemos 3 hijas y un hijo. Soy la directora de Arizona Indian Gaming Association. So, I'm Judy Ferreira. I have a beautiful backyard at the reservation of the San Carlos Apache tribe. It's 1.8 million acres. It's beautiful. And I'm very appreciative to be here. I am the director of the Arizona Indian Gaming Association, and we advocate, educate, partner, and promote tribal gaming. That's a lot of responsibilities, but you know what? It has done tremendous things. Just wanted to recognize at this point, we met Chairman Robert Miguel of the Auction Indian community earlier today. Senora Octaviana Trujillo, the former chair of the Pascoyaqui tribe. Mr. Verlin Jose, chairman of the Tohono Nation, will also be here. And Carla Johnson, the vice chairwoman of the Tohono Nation, is back there. And she, yay. And one thing, I have the honor of working with tribal leaders. And when you work with tribal leaders, you have to realize all the topics that we're here being talked about today are just part of what their day includes. There's so many things that we have to learn, and so their presence here definitely shows the importance of this thing. Chucho, muchas gracias for the invitation for this and recognizing the importance of having tribes involved in the conversation. Gracias.
It's going to be very hard to follow that. I only speak 2 languages. My name is Jose Quiroga. I'm the Director for Global Development in the Fulton Schools of Engineering at Arizona State University. I'm originally from Mexico, but I've been in Phoenix for the last 24 years. The last 20 years of my life have been dedicated to global workforce development projects, helping bring to other places around the world some of the expertise we have in the Fulton Schools of Engineering and training people, helping universities and all around the world. We have projects that go back about 15 years in Southeast Asia, specifically Vietnam, working with Mexico a lot as well. And currently, I'm the Managing Director of the International Technology Security and Innovation Project at Arizona State University, which is a State Department grant that is part of the CHIPS Act to work with 6 countries around the world, 3 in the Americas with Mexico, Costa Rica, and Panama, and 3 in the Indo-Pacific with Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia. And the purpose of this project is to help support these countries and develop their strategic plans around semiconductor assembly, test, and packaging. And with the goal of diversifying the supply chain for semiconductors and avoid what we saw after the pandemic where there were no chips. So this project that we're working on has a big focus on workforce development and training the workforce in these 6 countries for semiconductor ATP and help rebalance that global supply chain that is mostly out of China. And helping countries like Mexico to build up that workforce. So thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you. Jose, I think this one doesn't work. Yeah. Oh, yes, it's working. Thank you, everyone, for your introductions. Well, also my background is in internationalization of higher education and in university cooperation, universities or cooperation among universities in North America. And I think that universities are a very important element of the equation of workforce development for a country. In this regard, I would like to ask Sean Manley to share, in his experience, what are the challenges, the opportunities that help and in other cases jeopardize cooperation among universities between the United States and Mexico. In this case, I know you are also involved in projects with Canada, but also currently I don't think that cooperation, academic cooperation in North America is going through a really very good moment. But at the same time, it seems that this is a moment in which academic cooperation is more needed. So can you tell us more about this, Sean, please?
Absolutely. So, well, thanks, Miguel. I guess when I think about challenges, there are multiple dimensions of challenges. Some of them are just linguistic in terms of ability to communicate across borders, and some of them are political in terms of sort of whether or not the wind is at our backs collectively to try to promote collaboration, or if there are many political hurdles. I would say probably one of the biggest challenges, of course, is the ability to sustain the funding stream to support international collaboration and to have kind of a regular, predictable plan when it comes to that. And that's probably the biggest hurdle for our little group. We have about 130 higher education institutions that participate in the consortium, but many of them struggle with their own funding, and so at the level of the consortium, we struggle to maintain our activities, and it's very hard to predict exactly what we'll have any given year to do and what we can do with it. The opportunities, of course, are very tangible. We support a lot of international academic mobility and exchange. So we have thousands of students going among about 90 of our member institutions. Through our student exchange program, we have a faculty exchange program that has matched hundreds of faculty members on international projects, sometimes in the area of research, sometimes in the area of teaching, but collaborative international activities. Some of those collaborations are virtual, and some of them are actually in person. And then we also have sent dozens of staff members, academic staff members, to a partner consortium for them to have job shadowing experiences internationally in Europe, primarily. And so we provide that sort of an internationalization toolbox to our member institutions, but at the same time, we're a very small office, so maintaining that is a struggle.
Thank you very much, Sean. Well, Judy, she can give us also, as I said, this is a very complex topic and can be discussed from different angles. But also, you cannot, I'm going to jump from academic cooperation to the more private sector perspective and tribal perspective. And please, can you tell us, for example, what would be the needs, in your opinion, of workforce for Arizona, from tribes, the needs of the entire region that should be addressed during current moments of, nearshoring, more integration, trade growth between Mexico and the United States?
Okay, I might go a little bit off course on that, but I will get back around to the question. And it kind of involves this, right here. This, we all know what this is, right? It's the fork. Let's see it, come on. Here we go. The reason I say that is because I wore this during my daughter's graduation from ASU, and I'll probably wear it again when she graduates this fall. And the reason I say about my daughter is because she's did her bachelor's, healthcare management, healthcare compliance and regulation. She's doing her master's in, what is she doing? Indian legal program, or the master's in legal studies with health law and administration and contracts and management. And you're like, why is she saying this? The reason I'm saying this is because we have a lot of needs back on our own reservations. And a lot of those needs of our own jobs are being filled by people who are not from our reservations. And that's great because we need them. But that's where I think a lot of our challenges are when we have looking for ways that we can help in the job market is we have a lot of needs back home. And a lot of times when we have those needs, people are immediately filled into these positions. And I think that's important. Mr. Jacob Moore, who is with ASU, he knows that since tribal gaming has happened, we have been able to send many, many people, and I say we being tribes, and I'm talking on behalf of my tribe as being, I was one of the students that got to go to school and get help by tribal gaming dollars. And I think record numbers of students are graduating from ASU that each year that are from tribal nations. And most of the time, those students are going back to their reservations. A lot of them are not getting the international or other kind of things like that, but we are all getting the healthcare, the education, the engineering, the construction, and so many of those kind of things, which is wonderful. But a lot of times, a lot of our kids, a lot of our non-kids, actually we had somebody on a reservation that was 76 years old that got her bachelor's degree, and she said she was doing it so that she could get her grandkids and tell her grandkids, you have to get your degree, I did it. And that's what I think tribal gaming has allowed us to do, is have the resources and help fill those spots. But back to one of the things as far as what we've been able to do, I think, as in our industry is expand and take the steps a little bit farther than what we've taken before. You know, the movie Frodo, where Lord of the Rings, and there's sometimes people go so far in life and they take that step, and there's a part where Frodo and Sam are walking and they're going so far, and the guy, Sam, stops and he goes, and they say, "What's wrong?" He says, "I'm going, if I step one more step farther, it's one step farther than I've ever been away from home." And a lot of times for us to take that step and do something different that's a little bit different from what maybe our parents did, or maybe our cousin did, or maybe that we know others have done, that's something I think that might be holding us back. It might be the language. And a lot of times, and we had the opportunity to meet with Chucho, and Malera Alvarez took us down to Mexico, in Mexico City. And the meetings were some of the most productive meetings I think I've ever had. They were supposed to be at 2-hour dinners. They ended up 5-hour dinners. But we found so many similarities that made it even a more valuable first meeting, that it just made things happen. Why? Maybe because we're family. Like Chairman Miguel said, we're a family. I have family in Chihuahua. I have family in Sonora. You know, I know a family that is in Guerrero. All these different places that we have that connection, I think that's something that's very neat to have, but we need to find that connection. Maybe opportunities like this. Let's take that step a little farther than where we've gone before, and I think that's something that is one of the challenges, is having that courage and having that determination to do that.
Thank you very much, Judy. Well, and talking about supporting our students in the region, now I would like Jorge Mendoza, General Consul of Mexico in Phoenix, to, well, speak about something that I have seen that you, Jorge, General Consul of Mexico in Phoenix, you have been involved with the community. You have been a very active consul, getting to know the people. And I'm sure that maybe you have been aware, or you have testified or witnessed some of the needs, experiences of students in the region. From the consular perspectives, what are your experiences in like addressing the students' needs, or I mean, how these actions of being involved in the community and also dealing with students that are transborder, cross-border students from Sonora, Arizona, and also from Mexico and Arizona, how does it relate? Is a common topic in your job, during your duties? How do you deal with those kind of topics? And also I would like to ask you, Consul, if you can talk about more about the strategies that the Mexican government, the Consul, the government of Sonora, in which you have been involved, has been advancing to address, for example, this current conjunctures like the semiconductors industry development in North America, supply chain disruption, nearshoring, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Yes, well, the consular work, it's very wide, in the sense that we have to perform several duties, mainly on community affairs. We have to work on documentation matters and protection and consular assistance. And well, the one, I'm saying this because I'm not an expert on the topic. I actually am here to learn from you guys. But what I see is the difficulty to obtain the visa, the student visa for Mexicans. We're talking about regional integration. We like to talk about integration, but the Department of State, the U.S. Department of State, issues 1 million visas for students yearly, but only 1.5% of them go go to Mexican young students. So about 27-28% of them goes to Chinese students. So how we can talk about forming a North American regional bloc to compete against China if we're not issuing more visas to Mexican students? I think, about 40% of the applications are denied, is what I have seen. So we need to have more Mexican students being integrated with the academic and cultural aspect of the U.S. I think that's essential, and it's one step that we have to take. But also, we in Mexico, we have to provide with the proper education in the sense that they can be part of the labor force at any moment in North America. Let's say English as a second language should be part of the curriculum of any elementary school in Mexico, since elementary school to high school, not just like a subject like you take and you don't obtain nothing. So also the access to funds for Mexican students has been difficult. So what I see is many initiatives by academic institutions like CONAGEP, ASU. Also, it is worth to mention the MOU that was signed with ASU with the Embassy of Mexico about the training workforce on the semiconductor industry. That was 2 years ago. So those initiatives help without doubt, but we need more policies that are designed by the federal governments of both countries, or actually the three countries, in order to talk about a real integration as a North American bloc.
Thank you, Consul. Well, before I share some personal experiences about the difficulties that Mexican students face in order to come to the United States to study, I would like to ask and to ask Jose to share some of the projects, workforce development projects that he's been running in the last years. He's very experienced with this kind of initiatives, not only in Mexico, but around the world, like in Vietnam. And besides asking him to share with us some of his experience, I would like to ask you, Jose, if you can give us your perspective, your opinion about if you think that in this current moment of nearshoring fever, do you think that the projects that you've been running around the world could operate and could be successful as in Mexico and in the context of Mexico, as in other countries? What are the challenges that you find? Because you have planned your programs so far, right? And you are ready to go and take them to implementation. But have you adjusted some of the ideas you had and you experienced before to the Mexican context in order to make them successful?
Well, yes, and you have to. So I think so far we've talked about academic cooperation, private sector engagement with workforce, and student mobility, and I'll address your question as well. I'll try to weave everything into my response, so bear with me. As I said, I am originally from Mexico, so I was one of those students that got a visa to come and study here. And then later, when I was already here, through my parents, I became a citizen. So I've been here, and now I call Arizona my home, but I still have strong roots in Sonora and in the other parts of Mexico. So yes, I think those policies between Arizona and Mexico on student mobility are very important, and part of what we are going to be working with Mexico on for semiconductors, because I think right now we're in a unique and I say unique because Mexico is like no other country that has been selected to be part of this, shares a border with the United States. So if you talk about nearshoring, there's nothing nearer than Mexico. So I think this is an opportunity that it'll be once in a lifetime, and Mexico and the region needs to seize this moment. There's funding, there's a lot of interest to relocate a lot of the processes for semiconductors. And the border states, particularly the ones near Arizona and Texas, where the big fabs are going to be coming up online in the next 2 years, that is where Baja California, Sonora, Chihuahua, all of the border states have a 5-year window of opportunity to do the things that need to be done, like the policies needed for the movement of goods between in the border and of people as well. So in terms of workforce and engagement with industry, that is extremely important to understand what the opportunities are in terms of those processes that could be coming to Mexico. And that's in the back-end process for of the manufacturing process for semiconductors. So it's the assembly, the testing, and the packaging of those semiconductors. When those are fabricated, and a lot of them are fabricated here, it's a little piece of glass that is shipped all across the world to Taiwan or other places in China to be packaged and connected to something that can then go into a cell phone or a computer, or even now watches and even rings now have semiconductors. So this is an opportunity that Mexico and we as a university are very willing to help with, and that's on workforce development. And this is an industry that needs so many workers that no one region, no one state in Mexico will be able to supply that, or anywhere. We need to tap into all of the overlooked populations. It could be veterans, underemployed, unemployed, and everywhere. So I think the mobility of students in the next 5 years, and not just students, but also workers that are highly skilled, is going to be crucial. So that's one of the points. And then in terms of academic cooperation, in my introduction, I talked about over the last 20 years, I've been working with ASU, making connections between the School of Engineering and different countries. And the best example I have for this is our work in Vietnam. When it was, 2007 or 8, when Intel decided to open up their largest manufacturing facility in the world, and they selected Ho Chi Minh City as that site. But they knew that they did not have the workers. But so they approached us, the School of Engineering at ASU, to help universities in Vietnam to build up that capability, and also train the faculty so their programs could improve, and their pedagogy, because I think Vietnam back then in 2008, they were about 40 years behind of where education was. Everything was very top-down. The Ministry of Education dictated the curriculum. Universities had no autonomy, and there was no freedom for universities to modify curriculum. So we started training faculty, but then we quickly realized it's not just the faculty we need to train. We also need to train the administrators and the rectors, at the ministry level, to understand, that opportunity that they had. They had Intel coming, so they had a window to get it done, and Vietnam, did the work, and it's a lot of work. Now, just last night, I woke up to yet another university in Vietnam that got ABET accreditation, which is the standard for engineering schools in the United States. If we were to tell this to anyone, 20 years ago, that we're going to be getting ABET accredited schools in Vietnam, they would have said we were crazy. But yeah, it's a lot of work, and all of this happens through really close collaborations with the private sector and understanding what those needs are and working with universities to bridge those gaps and quickly move to that. So I'll just close by saying that Mexico is not 40 years behind in terms of education. We graduate, and I say we because I'm still Mexican, so Mexico graduates a really large workforce of engineers. Like if you look at the statistics around the world, I think per capita Mexico is one of the top countries that graduates engineers. We just need to learn or understand how to refocus them to industries that are in high demand and the opportunity. And I think in this next 5 years, it's semiconductors. I don't know if I answered your question, but let me know if I need to add something.
No, maybe we can continue. Of course, you answered it, but give us more ideas to continue the conversation. Actually, yeah, Mexico graduates more engineers than France, for instance. So it's that important, the number. Well, I would like to share two stories about my experience. One is about I used to work in the University of Guadalajara, and with ASU, we run an initiative in which ASU offered scholarships for 10 Mexican students. This happened like 8 years ago. And talking about the challenges, because there are many. For instance, sometimes there are financial barriers, but other times we had the funding to send students to study PhD programs here in Arizona. And our task was to found 8 students in Guadalajara, in the state of Jalisco, which is, in theory, one of the more innovative states in Mexico, to find 10 students willing to study a PhD here in ASU. It was very hard. After 1 year and a half, we only found 1 student willing to come. And the main barrier was language. As you can see, English is not easy for Mexicans or for many of us. And that was the problem. So people wanted to come, but couldn't because they didn't pass the TOEFL. So that's one difficulty, very different, that is related to cultural aspects. Another story I want to share, and then pass the microphone for you to comment, is that a very interesting initiative in Mexico took place when the Pacific Alliance, the Alianza del Pacífico, which was an economic integration process between Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile, well, the 4 countries started to provide money to support academic mobility, to create more ties, social ties, identity ties, and of course, entrepreneurial and business ties among the 4 countries. It was very successful. So from, 1 year, if we took 1 year as base and then 3 years after, mobility from these 4 countries, Colombia, Peru, skyrocketed in Mexico, and they were the main countries sending students to Mexico. We were talking about in the previous, they were talking about in previous panels, a future maybe without the border, right? Well, I think that if student mobility is not really a very different, at least in an allegoric or metaphorical aspect, it's not very different to have it as having a border dividing the 2 countries for human mobility, because there are borders everywhere. And students in Mexico or in Colombia, in order to go and spend a semester in another country, they don't need to enroll. And usually, countries are very open to receive students. In my experience, the only country who is not open to receive a student in students' mobility is the United States, because they, of course, they require to pay tuition, to pass exams, etc., etc. In a hypothetical and ideal world, what is your opinion? Why in North America we cannot develop this kind of mechanisms in which American universities can be more willing to receive students from Mexico? And also, Judy, how can we make American partners, universities, governmental agencies, any other actors, to send more students to Mexico in order to create like a really North American identity in terms of workforce development, skills, and maybe create closer cultural ties. So I don't know what are your thoughts about these realities, but can we start with you, Judy?
Sure. You know, I didn't know I was going to get this question, but that's okay. We were down in Mexico City in June, and we were at a celebration of the 4th of July at the ambassador's residence. It was a wonderful event. And one thing we got to meet were 5 leaders were there, but we got to meet different folks from different programs. And one of the individuals came up to us, and unfortunately we couldn't meet with them, but there was a group of young people, 14 people from one of the indigenous tribes that were coming to the University of New Mexico. And they were coming to get to know New Mexico. And I thought, why can't a group of Native students come down to get to know Mexico City? And try to find things that are of interest. Try to find a way where they learn Dagote, they learn Buenas tardes, they learn ways to communicate, because I think that's one of the things that we need to find that way to connect. During the, 2020 and 2022, we were communicating in new ways that some of us didn't know how to communicate, whether it was Zoom or Teams or whatever. But we found a way to make it happen, and we're still doing it. I think we have to look at the young people right now, and some of them, millennials, are pretty fearless. They scare me because they're not scared to do a lot of stuff. But what interests them? What interests the next generation? Even if it's tourism, even if it's activities. You know, one thing I saw when I was in Mexico City the other day, skateboarders. There's some skateboarders out there, and I was like wanting to say, gosh, I wish I would have brought a skateboard or stickers and stuff like that I could give them that. Maybe we look at creative ways that our generation, and I know there's some of you that are younger than me, but why don't we look at ways for that connection to happen? To where, I mean, they might not want to go, even though it's a very prestigious school, but Thunderbird School of Global Management, that's a great school, but some might not be willing to say, I'm going to that. Maybe they want to test it out. Maybe it's a way of doing this in a way to interest, you know, an 17, 18-year-old that might not be sure where they want to go to yet. Let's interest them. Let's find that way. Let's get that. Well, there's an internship. To me, that's exciting. Maybe it's graphic design. Maybe it's art. Maybe it's sustainable studies or something like that. I don't know, but let's find a way.
But maybe Sean knows. Sean, how can we foster student mobility both ways between Mexico and the United States?
That's a very difficult nut to crack. It's one that we've been trying to address for forever, ever since the beginning of our student exchange program. Part of it, I think, has to do with the very different understanding and conception of higher education in terms of who benefits from it and who should pay for it. So in the United States, we privatize a lot of those expenses, thinking that it becomes sort of a private benefit primarily as well, having graduated from higher education. Whereas in Mexico, it's heavily subsidized by the government, and tuition is relatively much less. It's much less, I guess, for many demographics. And Canada, it's sort of in between, but still privatizes quite a bit of its expense. And so the question then becomes, how do you get students who pay large amounts of money to go to their higher education institution to go to another country where the students sitting in the class beside them have had more heavily subsidized surroundings? and convince them that the value is there. Even though I agree, I always argue that it is there. Sometimes that becomes a big hurdle, as well as getting institutions to offer conditions under which international students can come to the United States or to Canada or to other countries where it's heavily, it's expensive, particularly out-of-state tuition. And higher education institutions often look to their international students as a means of income, as we all know. And so international education departments are often fairly cash flow positive because they target international students with means to come and pay international student tuition. And so this becomes very difficult to get institutions in the United States and Canada to open up exchange seats in our student exchange. They don't receive nearly as many international exchange students as Mexican institutions. I'm sorry. They don't receive nearly as many exchange students that way. So that creates an imbalance, and it's not a sustainable situation. So I guess, getting back to Miguel's question, one way to do it would be to create scholarships and pools of empty seats, I guess you could say, where you could attract students from other countries to come and either have those seats subsidized somehow through scholarships, or simply offer to fill up part of your programs where they haven't filled up potentially all the way with some international exchange students. Those might be ways to do it, but honestly, we've struggled with it for over 2 decades.
Well, thank you. I have a question for Jose. Traditional higher education flows happen this way, or take place this way. You enroll in a full-time program, you enroll in a university to a full-time program, or you go to spend 1 semester in another university. But these are the traditional ways. What other mechanisms, options, schemes do we have to expand higher education access, workforce development trainings? And I think that you might have some ideas, Jose.
Well, I'm very glad you asked that, because yes, we do. Just to make a point, back to the other question, I think universities so far in the United States have had the privilege to be at the top of the food chain. Everyone wants to come to the United States to study, and they've had this culture of exclusivity, and a lot of universities pride themselves by saying, for every 100 students that apply, we only accept 1. And I think Arizona State University has done a great job at doing the opposite. So at ASU, we're very focused on access and giving education to anyone that wants it. So, with Michael Crow as president, in the last, I don't know how, it's been 24 years, ASU has really made that change and that impact with a big focus on education. And also part of our charter is the word global. So we value global engagement and connections to other countries, which is not common in other universities. So I just wanted to maybe add something there. That's why. So mobility to the U.S. has never been an issue, but it's more of an issue of the barriers that exist in universities in the United States to accept people. But I think that is changing, and there's been other countries now that are really good. They have really great programs and they become specialized. So back to your question. Can you repeat your? Yeah. So models. So yeah. So it in terms of the access. The traditional way is students enroll in a program, they go through their program for 4 or 5 years, and they graduate. But life is different, and now the way here in the Fulton Schools of Engineering, we're tackling things in a very modular way, and in a way where students can learn what they need to learn right on time, and sometimes not just go through an entire degree. So we need to create pathways for people to work and study and go to work and come back and study and continue that development over time. So we call it lifelong learning. And I think that is a model that we need to really look into and other universities need to look into because, education is evolving and people need to learn, people need to know how to learn when they need to learn something new. So learning how to learn is very important. But the models around, enabling that are also need to be there. So we are using a lot of these stackable credentials in the Fulton Schools of Engineering for people that just want to learn a topic, and they can just take a course and advance their career if they're not interested in a master's. But if they like it, they can come back and take another module, and then another one, and that gives them a certification, and now they can apply for a better job. And if they want to keep going, they can continue that until they get a master's. So that model of education, I think it's also very important, especially when it comes to evolving subjects like semiconductors and other technologies like artificial intelligence, things that are moving very quickly. Degrees are getting obsolete faster now. So these other types of models where, through certifications and short courses, people can start building up those skills and maybe even going, getting eventually their master's. Those are the types of models that education institutions should start thinking about.
And also, just related to that, can anyone in the world can enroll to online courses in ASU? So,
Yeah.
like in Mexico?
Yes, so a lot of what we have, because we're also, the School of Engineering at ASU is the largest school in the country, the largest engineering school in the country. So we are we're the size of universities in other states. So the School of Engineering has made easy for people to enroll in online classes. So most of our curriculum is already online, and that is also available for people around the world. The cost is not, very different, but if you take into account the cost of living and moving to a new country, it does make a difference. So a lot of our programs, even we now have a PhD that is fully online. We have masters that are online. So yeah, we also have a lot of access to different courses. And the way we create courses now is taking that model that I was talking about into account. So we don't just build a course. So when we're redesigning courses for online, we're thinking about breaking that down into smaller chunks of information. That be, a module in a course, like 3 credit hour course, could become a small, like mini, short course that could be offered online. So that's the way we're now approaching the development of courses for scale.
That's really amazing, Jose. I would like to pass the floor to Consul General Jorge Mendoza, but also to hear about your thoughts about this conversation. But also I would like to add a quick question. Which one do you think is the best diplomatic tool for consuls to promote more educational ties between Mexico and the United States? And if you don't have it, maybe if you had you can make a wish, what would be that diplomatic tool that you would like to have in order to foster more or to maybe provide information like this to people? I don't know.
Yeah, well, diplomatic tool, that's a good concept. So, what we do in the consular work, it's in what we call as a diplomatic consular diplomacy is what we do in a consular context. Because a consulate, it's like, in many senses, a small embassy in a specific region, but with the addition that we have to work with the community. And we have to defend the interest of Mexico in that region or that specific district, but also the interest of the Mexican people in that district. We have in Arizona five consulates. The one in Phoenix is the largest one in terms of the land that we covered. Our district oversees 7 counties, which being Maricopa the main one is where we are based on. But also we have to have a relationship with all sort of authorities in northern Arizona. So that includes not only mayors, the county supervisors, council members, local legislators, but also academic institutions. So all the work that we do in that aspect to strengthen all the ties with all these authorities, with all the actors or players that have to do, that have an involvement with the relationship between Arizona and Mexico, then it's part of our work. And the duty that we have is also to strengthen those ties with academic institutions. That's a very important effort that we have to do in our specific area of work. And while we do that, in the relationship that we have with the ASU, with NAU and Flagstaff in our case, for instance, the Consul in Tucson who was here used some panels before. He has to strengthen his relationship with the U of A and with the community colleges there. Also, the community colleges relationship that we have with them is very important. We work in promoting scholarships. We have a very small but growing program on scholarship for young students of Mexican origin that may have some struggles in order to pay the tuition. And well, it's a very important component of the diplomacy, consular diplomacy that we do. The relationship that we have with all the academic institutions, in our case, in the consular district of Phoenix.
Thank you very much, Consul. We have time for questions from the audience. We have here one, and then right there.
Gracias, Miguel. Thank you very much for the panelists. Jose, I think you were very punctual in the projects that you have here. Congratulations for that. Sean was very keen to speak about the trilateral problems of mobility, and the Consul, well, what the great job they're doing here. And Julie put a question, which I have already in my mind. We spoke about high skill labor mobility and workforce. Have you any ideas what should we do? And this, because with Canada, we did have in Mexico some labor mobility at the mid and low skill levels. And nearshoring is it's a phenomenon that, of course, will need high skill, especially in this type of semiconductors and this type of manufacturing. But there are other areas where you need mid-skill level workers and even the low-skill workers for infrastructure construction. And I remember that one of the great problems with Canada was that each of the provinces have their own protocols in terms of the, let's say, how to embed a plumber, for example. You know, they have different prerequisites. So how can you pull up the level of low and mid-skilled workers, let's say Mexican low and mid-skilled workers, to the level of the US or Canadian mid and low skilled workers in order really to have a labor mobility on those stratus? That's the question.
I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. There are a need for various types of workers in most U.S. states, for example, and I think the ideal way to address that is simply to think about it from a policy perspective and say, you know, we do need people that can work in the fields. We do need people that can do various different activities, and we're not having a supply domestically that's adequate for that, to address that need. It makes perfect sense to create categories for visas where people can gain access to that opportunity. And preferably where the conditions are such that those activities take place in an environment where it's set up to be safe and non-exploitative and all the rest of those things. So it makes a lot of sense for government to step in and think about that more actively. The high-skilled workers, of course, are the ones that are most frequently coming through university and higher education programs. But it does make a lot of sense to extend those opportunities more broadly, particularly given the workforce shortages that we are already facing and will continue to face in the near future. I actually wanted to mention something that's a little bit off topic, but it's funny. It's as a barrier because I have a member institution in Mexico that wants to come to ASU in November 9th. And they're bringing 35 of their most successful students, the university president, the senior international officer, and a couple of other people from the faculty. And they want to meet with people from ASU, potentially for the students to come here and do their graduate work. But they want to meet on November 9th, which is Veterans Day. It's a holiday, right? So this is a funny little barrier because it's hard to get people to want to take a group and host a group on Veterans Day. But this is the type of thing that happens in international education all the time. So it's likely that I'll be hosting the group potentially by myself and here in Phoenix when I live in Tucson. So it's just kind of funny how that works. But I should mention it just in the off chance anybody would like to meet. Excellent. So I'll give you my coordinates and then maybe we can coordinate for that activity because it's a great opportunity to receive very, very highly qualified students for graduate work here. And unfortunately, it's on a holiday, but.
I have two questions, actually. I'm going to take advantage of the mic. One, I know that it's been a lot being said about the workforce, that it's the maquiladoras are coming to Mexico. At some point when I was a teen, I thought it was cool to go work at a manufacturer, and I only lasted 2 weeks. The amount of work that you have to do for the pay, it was just not there. So now with the border cities having more access to maquiladoras, which is needed, are we considering I know it was mentioned earlier, more benefits and better pay, but is that something that is really being pushed for, or is that something that it's kind of talked about because it's different the way it's managed in the States and the way it's managed in Mexico, especially because they're looking for cheap labor? That's the first question. The second one is there are programs that bring people from Mexico to work into the States for like temporary jobs. Now with so many people from Latin America staying or coming to Mexico, is it even being considered to include them in those programs? Is someone here aware of that?
I think your first question would be more for like industry to answer. I think the maquiladora concept is outdated, and especially when it comes to high-tech industries like semiconductors. You know, a lot of people think about, oh, there's a new company coming to town, and they think about maquiladoras, and these are like considered dirty jobs because you're there in the floor assembling, and you know and I'm going to go back to the semiconductors topic, is that's what I'm working on. Semiconductors is a completely different thing. You're in a clean room, and when we say clean room, there's no speck of dust that has to be in there. So these are not dirty jobs. And this is the shift in mentality that we need to help students and even parents understand, that jobs in semiconductor industry are not jobs at maquiladoras. these are very high-tech with equipment that is worth millions and millions of dollars that even a speck of dust can break down the entire production. So, yeah, so in terms of, investing in better wages and benefits and all that, that is beyond what we can do. We'll certainly include those components with our conversations with governments, because this is a policy issue. But yeah, that would go beyond what I can answer for your first question, and I do not have an answer for your second question, sorry. Maybe someone else in the audience.
What do you want to comment? Please go ahead.
I can comment, but I can't answer your question, unfortunately. I did take a group of senior international officers and university presidents to visit a technological university in Mexico one time at a car manufacturing plant. It was built right on top of the car manufacturing plant. And one of the things that shocked everybody was that one of the requirements were that the students that applied to the technological university were required to submit to genetic testing to ensure that they wouldn't have any markers for future disease in order to become students at the technological university, which would eventually lead them to employment at the car manufacturer. So that was something that was quite eye-opening for many of our participants, because it was just something that you wouldn't expect necessarily, but that is one of the concessions that was given to that car manufacturing company as part of their deal in that particular place. So I guess, that doesn't answer your question, but I remember thinking that that was quite a dramatic example of something that we didn't expect to hear.
We have only one more question very quick.
Yes, very quickly. And I will address this to Judy. Yes. You were in Mexico, and I remember that when your delegation went to Mexico City, I had the opportunity of talking with some of the delegates, of the representatives of the tribes. I worked with the World Intellectual Property Organization on a specific issue that's called cultural knowledge and traditional knowledge. And I think that the creation of value is not only in high technology. We have a lot of wisdom. We have a wisdom bank in Mexico, and you have a wisdom bank in Arizona on cultural knowledge. And that, look at this that was distributed today. These are representations of native art. This has a value in the market. It's not only chips that we are talking about. We have traditional medicine, traditional knowledge that can be converted into value, and that we can create and think about this, because we're talking about mobility that may take years or that requires a quantum leap. But we have to also give our heritage to the new generations, answering your question. And the new generations could be interested in creating, starting from the traditional knowledge, the cultural knowledge, traditional medicine, new forms for the medical sector, for medicine, for pharmaceuticals, for art, and all that is creating patrimony for this, and taking the advantage of the traditional knowledge of the tribes and the ones that we have in Mexico. Thank you.
If I may, when we have those wonderful dinners, we talk about things like this. And I think that's where the similarities or the likenesses of so much of who we are. We don't want to leave. Just like family, you don't want to leave the dinner table. You want to continue the conversation on. You want to look at the art. We go down to the Museum of Cultural Anthropology so many times. Every time I find something different that can relate. A lot of that relates to our pueblos in our New Mexico. A lot relates to the Pascoyaqui or the Tanatam. And it even goes to the Apaches, the language. And we had a meeting with one of the senators at one point, and looking at the similarity of the language, that our language, the Apache language, could possibly be one of the next languages of indigenous languages recognized. Why don't we take that similarities? Why don't we take something we know right now and start developing those relationships? Let's go to Hermosillo the next time we're going to meet here. Let's take young people that are a little bit younger and start creating that interest, but understand that it takes a group of people, multi-generations, to start building the future for the 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, 20-year. Maybe that's that step, one step farther than I've ever gone, that maybe our elders, or maybe our middle-aged people, or maybe our youth needs to take, to start that creation of that, those relationships to continue on in ways that we know, medicine or traditional medicines, art, music, all the things that make us who we are. Thank you.